Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Kansas City Public Library. Great to see all of you here. I'm Julie Robinson. I'm the Refugee and Immigrant Services Outreach Manager for the Kansas City Public Library, which is a really long title to have to remember. My job has been in existence for 18 months now. And I like to say we started in the basement because I work in the basement at the Central Branch. So we had to build the foundation and the walls, and now I'm at ground level. And I didn't do it by myself. There's a lot of people out there who helped me, every bit of it. But now we are moving forward. Now we're getting ready to start classes. We're getting ready to do some exciting things in the near future. So I hope you all pay attention to our webpage and our email blasts. RIS stands for Refugee and Immigrant Services. So if you ever get something that just says RIS on it, that's what it stands for. So I want to tell you about some things coming up. Next month is June, and we are doing something for Immigrant Heritage Month, which this is the third year they have done this. And so we are doing two things. And they're both at the Nelson Atkins Museum. And there are flyers that look just like this out in the other room. And the first one is on Thursday, the 2nd of June, and is called The Immigrants Are In, Shaping American Art, conveniently followed on Saturday, the 4th, by The Immigrants Are In, Shaping Kansas City Art. So on Saturday, you will have members of our community who are immigrants who are artists in our community. And on Thursday, you will get a tour of 3 different artists' works that are hanging at the Nelson. And then, because it's Immigrant Heritage Month, but it's also World Refugee Day in June. However, Ramadan is falling in June, and that leaves out a large percentage of our refugee population from enjoying the day. So we've moved it to July 9th because it just sounded like a really good day. It's a nice Saturday. So the flyer that looks like this one, and I know the people in the back are probably saying, I can't see that, but there's some at the desk. Hold that date, and it will be, I always have to read the whole thing. It's the University of Medicine and Biosciences, which is up on Independence Avenue. Okay? And because I'm a librarian, I have to tell you about the book list that is available out there. And there are books there that you can check out and hopefully enjoy. Hopefully it'll spark something for you. We are always looking for ideas for more programming, for things that you'd like to hear about, like to know about. And now I am going to welcome, let me get this right too, Confronting Extremist Violence, the Refugee Crisis, and Fear, Faith Responses. And this is presented by the Greater Kansas City Interfaith Council and the American Friends Service Committee and over 25 community sponsors. That is an awful lot of groups to bring together to put this on for you, and I hope that you really enjoy it. And I am going to introduce Ira Harrett, who is with the American Friends Service Committee, and he is going to take over and do a much better job than I. Ira, come on up. There you go. It's all yours.
Thank you, Julie. My name's Ira Harrett. I'm the program coordinator for the American Friends Service Committee, which is a Quaker-based peace and social justice organization. Before I offer my short introductory comments, I want to thank all of our partners who helped organize the event, especially the Greater Kansas City Interfaith Council and the Kansas City Public Library. So let's give them a hand. And as Julie has said, we were very, very pleasantly, well, not quite surprised, but encouraged by the fact that 25 organizations in the community thought that this issue was important enough that they chose to be co-sponsors and support it financially and in other ways. And we don't have time to list all of their names, but their names were on the PowerPoint that was running before the program, and they're also listed on a sign at the information table. So also, I'm wearing two hats tonight. I'm, in addition to being the program coordinator for the American Friends Service Committee, I'm also a faith director for the Greater Kansas City Interfaith Council. And the council council's mission is basically to grow a sustainable, pervasive culture of knowledge, respect, appreciation, and trust amongst people of all faiths and religious traditions in the Greater Kansas City community. So their participation in this event I felt was natural and essential to give it meaning. And so a little bit about the event. The American Friends Service Committee, as I mentioned, is a Quaker-based peace and justice organization, and we're committed to reducing the causes of violence and conflict and human suffering in the world. And that can take many different forms, but over the past months, we were very concerned with what we saw as a growth in Islamophobia, a growth of hate language, and an exaggerated fear of terrorism and Islam. And so we thought, well, how can we counter all of these voices that are actually, some of which are actually gaining power and using it to their advantage, not having a huge PR kind of budget. And so we thought that the best way that we could do that is lift up the values that are part of each and every one of our backgrounds and histories and the values of the United States as a nation, and help remind the community what we really are based on. And so that not that those values are something that we only adhere to when it's convenient, but rather that they should be an essential part of our decision-making process. I will also note that our fears are not just, and our concerns are not just sort of subjective evaluations of what's going on in the world. It just so happened that earlier this week, the American Friends Service Committee released a report called Mixed Messages, How the Media Covers Violent Extremism and What We Can Do About It. And there's a flyer on the American Friends Service Committee table that you can pick up for more information. And some of the key things that the report found was that major media coverage of extremism overwhelmingly links Islam to extremism, framing all Muslims as a singular, monolithic group of potential extremists. They also found the contradictory ways in which the news media frame the rationality and irrationality of extremist groups, making them seem like inherent military targets. And further, it found that the news media covers violent responses to conflict more often than nonviolent responses. This makes it seem like violence is the only response to conflict that works. I'm excited to have our panel members who will be speaking to us shortly. But actually, before I go to that, I do want to invite you to consider endorsing or signing a solidarity statement, a statement of solidarity with people of Syria, refugees, and people of faith. It's this green flyer. If you don't already have one, please pick one up. And then there's a page that you can sign. We want to collect those signatures and help change the narrative, change the story around these things, and use all of your voices to help us do that. So I'm very pleased to have a panel of distinguished speakers and who I think can really bring to us new insights and perspectives on the challenges that we face. But I'll leave their introduction to our moderator, who is Bill Timaeus, a former Kansas City Star columnist and the author of a faith blog. So, Bill, would you take over?
Well, thank you for being here. I am Bill Timaeus, the former faith section columnist for the Kansas City Star, and this was back when the Star actually had a faith section. Although I'm formally retired from the paper these days, I still write a daily blog about faith that's on the Star's website, and I write columns for the Presbyterian Outlook and the National Catholic Reporter. My 6th book will be out this summer. It's called The Value of Doubt. I'm a member of Second Presbyterian Church, just a few blocks away here at 55th and Brookside, and I tend to look at these issues, through Presbyterian eyes, but I am not here tonight as a representative of my faith tradition. It's my privilege to introduce our panel tonight, which I will do in just a minute, but let me begin by briefly quoting what I thought was a well-reasoned and informative recent editorial in the Star that dealt with our subject tonight. Quote, "The Syrian refugee crisis is a big exam for everyone around the world, and it seems we are all going to fail it. As a result of the civil war in Syria, the United Nations estimates nearly 7 million people have fled the country. Today, Turkey hosts more than 2.7 million Syrian refugees, and Jordan hosts about 1 million. In addition, about 4 million Syrians have died in the war. The major question of how best to deal with the flood of refugees is tearing apart the European Union and has been hotly debated in the U.S. presidential race." The editorial went on to note that last year, the U.S. government announced its open door policy to Syrian refugees, pledging to admit 10,000 this year. And the editorial asked, how many governors have supported this policy with his or her statement? 9. Yes, only 9. Unfortunately, Kansas Governor Sam Brownback was not one of them. Well, with that as background, I will introduce our panelists and our first speaker. I'll say just a word about each of them, and they can add to that information when each of them takes their time to speak to us. First, Lieutenant Colonel Brian Steed, who will come up in a minute and lead off, is an instructor in military history at the U.S. Army Command and General Staff College in Leavenworth. To my far right is Dr. Vernon Howard, the president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference of Greater Kansas City. And to my immediate right is Fadi Bani Al-Marja, a member of the board of the Islamic Society of Greater Kansas City, and himself is from Syria. To my left, Rabbi Linda Steigman is a board member of the Rabbinical Association of Greater Kansas City. And to my far left, Father Paul Turner is the ecumenical representative for Bishop James V. Johnston, Jr. of the Catholic Diocese of Kansas City, St. Joseph. Well, you too are a part of tonight's discussion. If you have a question you would like the panel to address later, please write it on a piece of paper and raise your hand and get it to one of the people who will bring them up to me. So let us begin with Colonel Steed. Brian, come.